All right. So I want to welcome everybody. My name is Mary Roberge, and I am an AARP lead volunteer for AARP New Hampshire. I am joined today by Ashley Davis, who is our AARP New Hampshire staff member. And we're both excited to present an educational discussion about the importance of a free press tonight with Jim Schachter. Schechter. Thank you. At AARP New Hampshire, we are focused on the health, the financial security, and social connections that are critical to the well-being of the 50 plus in the Granite State. We carry out our work through targeted advocacy at the state and federal levels, compelling engagements of the 50 plus community statewide, and serving as a trusted resource for information for our members and also for the public. We hope that this presentation tonight will help everyone learn more about the free press, the importance of journalism, and how critical our role is. Veteran journalist Jim Schachter, the president and CEO of the award-winning New Hampshire Public Radio, will present for us tonight. Jim, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone who's participating. And I see that we have people from all over the country, which is exciting. I see that someone has already noted in the chat that we are meeting together today on the 90th birthday of Social Security. And as someone who is now qualified to take advantage of that, I join everyone here, I suspect, in appreciating that program and hoping that it can endure. I also want to tell you that we're conducting a little bit of an experiment here tonight. I was working right up to the last minute for my day job and really should have fed the cats before this started. We're going to see if we can feed the cats, including my big guy Soul, here afterwards. And if you see, if I get mauled in the course of the hour, you'll know it's because I really miscalculated on feeding the cats. We will, I will take questions at the end, and I will do my best to provide time for that. As you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and then we will come back to them because I want to take you on a little bit of a journey. Just very briefly about me, I have been a journalist for 45 years and worked at small papers and big papers. I spent 17 years at the New York Times before I went into public radio, and did that by becoming the head of news at WNYC in New York, which makes shows that you hear all around the country, and have now been at NHPR for just under 6 years. I'm a recent transplant to Northern New England. I quickly found that one of the best ways to connect with history here in my adopted hometown of Concord, New Hampshire, was to visit the State House. I don't know if anyone has been there. If you have, you know, it was built in 1819 and it has been in continuous use ever since. That is longer than any state capitol in America. I'm here at the cradle of American democracy. In many ways, our State House is a monument to the past. You reach the entrance by walking up a lawn adorned with statues of legendary New Hampshireites. Colonel John Stark, who was one of George Washington's most trusted generals in the Revolution. Daniel Webster, of course, who fought to maintain the young nation in the years leading up to the Civil War. Just last fall, the latest statue was unveiled, honoring a Concord school teacher named Krista McAuliffe. You go into the building, and there's actually, I noticed an AARP tour of the State House for people who are in New Hampshire next month. But if you went on that tour, you'd see you enter the building to a gallery of raggedy flags. They were banners carried by regiments of New Hampshire volunteers who fought for the Union in the great battles of the Civil War: Gettysburg, Antietam, Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville. I always pause to read those names before I walk upstairs past the Senate chamber and the governor's office to the largest room in this old building, the chamber that houses the New Hampshire House of Representatives. What's so special about the House chamber? Why am I bringing you here as part of remarks that were advertised as the critical role that a free and independent press plays in our society? It's certainly not because the chamber itself is a tribute to open-mindedness and independent thinking. It's actually a bit more of a monument to parochialism. Behind the speaker's dais are portraits of America's three greatest presidents, Washington, Lincoln, and New Hampshire's own Franklin Pierce. So rather, what's extraordinary about the chamber is that it is the embodiment of civic engagement. It's the hundreds of chairs crammed into the center of the room, seats for the 400 members of the New Hampshire House, the fourth largest legislative body in the world. 400 representatives for a state of 1.4 million people. That's one for every 3,500 residents. It's like if the US House had 96,000 members. And I did not mean to scare you by invoking that idea. Think of the New Hampshire House chamber, though, as a stake in the ground, a center of gravity, a statement of principle. Our state puts its faith in citizen government, in the values of civic participation and individual responsibility for the greater good, in we the people. Our 400 state reps, each paid just $100 a year, are a peak in the mountain range of volunteers who make New Hampshire tick. After all, we're a state with lots of elected officials, but relatively few government services. So it's volunteers, state legislators, town officials, nonprofit leaders, school board members that make community life here in New Hampshire possible. It's a wonder, citizen government. You can just walk into the State House in Concord and be heard on legislation. You can call a rep at home and give her a piece of your mind. It's also a source of extreme frustration, citizen government. You can probably guess the problems. The House is dominated by retirees. Nothing against retirees, AARP. But the House is dominated by retirees who have the time and resources to take a $100 a year job. There's virtually no staff, so a lot of legislation gets written by lobbyists and special interests. Big problems often don't get tackled thanks to unwieldy numbers and settled ways. And yet, even so, I can't help but feel inspired and at least a little bit hopeful as I walk the State House corridors. The walls are lined with portraits of prominent New Hampshireites through the centuries. There's a distinct bias for gun-wielding, big-whiskered white guys, but there's somebody for everyone. Generals and entrepreneurs, courageous nurses and caring physicians. Being a journalist for as long as I have been, I find myself drawn to the portrait of one Nathaniel Peabody Rogers. Born in 1794, Rogers was a Dartmouth grad, a lawyer, an abolitionist, and a newspaper editor. The placard on the wall in the State House says that starting in 1838, he ran an anti-slavery paper in Concord that advocated for women's rights, temperance, and pacifism. New Hampshire, it says, sent him as a delegate to the World's Anti-Slavery Convention in London in 1840. But you know what? He refused to participate because they wouldn't seat women delegates from the United States. So, values. The history of journalism is deeply rooted in partisanship. I acknowledge that. I imagine that Rogers's paper, The Herald of Freedom, was every bit as fair and balanced as Fox News or MSNBC. Now, that's not the kind of journalism I've practiced in my career, and it's not what you get from public radio, not from New Hampshire Public Radio, or your local public radio station, wherever you may be. For us, we have 130,000 people who listen every week or read our website, about 400,000 of those. People, 500,000 people around the country listen to our podcasts every month. On every platform, wherever you find NHPR, our brand is about independent, nonpartisan news, information, and storytelling. But Nathaniel Peabody Rogers did practice a couple of principles that are core to our journalism today. As the saying goes, our job, like his task, is to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. And his method, like our method, was to interrogate accepted wisdom, to be a thorn in the side of complacency, to use his pen and press in the service of the great American quest, the great American story, building a more perfect union. At NHPR, we express that purpose in our vision, our statement of purpose. That through trustworthy journalism, NHPR enriches lives and helps build stronger communities in New Hampshire and beyond. That's the ethos of public radio. In a nation divided, what is the fabric that holds communities together? Trust above all. And how is trust engendered? I know one answer: through an open-minded, even-handed search for shared truths and common understanding. In times of change, and boy, this is one of those times, in times of change, reliable news and information is every bit as critical for our community's well-being as clean air and clean water. That's what independent journalism can contribute to our common quest, that search for a more perfect union. And I have to tell you, I worry. I worry gravely for the health of journalism in America today. Press freedom is under attack on so many fronts. The president banned the Associated Press from Air Force One because it won't call the body of water that the Mississippi River empties into the Gulf of America. He cowed ABC into settling one baseless lawsuit and held the sale of CBS hostage with another baseless lawsuit, costing CBS News and 60 Minutes their editorial leaders in the process. He has willfully set out to confuse the American people by labeling real news fake and filling the public square with lies that get reported because, well, he's the president. For years, he's called journalists enemies of the people, denigrating the independent reporting that prompted the founders to enshrine the press as the one industry explicitly called out in our Bill of Rights. Why is freedom of the press in our Constitution? Not for the people who own the printing presses or today the broadcast towers or the web infrastructure. It's to ensure that we have an informed public, voters who can hold elected officials accountable and bend the will of the nation in the direction that its citizens choose. Now, of course, the administration's attacks on press freedom have struck at the heart of public media. 6 decades after President Lyndon Baines Johnson ushered in an era of universal, free, educational content and independent, nonpartisan news for all of America. After 6 decades, when local public radio stations, with a measure of taxpayer support provided through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, rose to fill a crucial role in the media marketplace, what with local newspapers collapsing and commercial broadcasters retreating from whatever commitment they had to local news and descending to the lowest common denominator of if it bleeds, it leads. After the last couple of decades, as cable news and social media algorithms fed Americans' worst instincts, pushing our buttons so we'd click on theirs. After all of that, the White House prevailed upon Congress last month to turn its back on a 6-decade-long public-private partnership and strip public radio and TV of federal funding. Abandoning its power of the purse, the Congress let the president snatch back 2 years of already approved funds for public media in a narrow set of votes in the Senate and the House. There's no new money, meanwhile, in the appropriations bills plotting their path across Capitol Hill. And as a consequence, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, birthed to such high expectations by LBJ, announced 2 weeks ago that it will be shutting its doors by the end of the year. The White House, to get there, called public media a grift that has, quote, ripped us off for too long, and declared that public radio and TV stations spread radical woke propaganda disguised as news, close quote. That baseless argument, if you can call it an argument, prevailed in Americans' poison politics in the summer of 2025. I want to tell you what this means for us at New Hampshire Public Radio. I think it's fairly illustrative of what's happening to your public media stations wherever you are in the country. So for this, I'm going to share my screen so that you can see some slides, and let me start this slideshow. Okay. All right. So for us, what's fundamentally changed is that an institution that was 94% supported by funds from its community, with about 6% of our revenue coming from taxpayers through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, has now become 100% community funded. So we have some stepping up to do. That's happening to your station as well. There are stations for whom federal funding uh, is as high as 70%, 70% of their revenue, because they are in places, many of them in rural communities, on reservations, in inner cities even, where there's very little base of local financial support. So the formulas have been skewed to support them more. Those are the stations that are at risk of shutting their doors based on the loss of federal funding. For us, just to give you a sense of the scale, we directly, in the coming year, because the calendar years start October 1 for federal funding. In that year, we are looking at a direct loss of of 540 odd thousand dollars on a $10 million budget. And then the indirect loss of a bunch of things that the CPB has subsidized for all public radio stations and public TV stations too. The satellites that connect us as stations and to NPR and PBS, the platforms on which we produce our websites, even the licensing of the music that you hear on during All Things Considered in Morning Edition, or during a music show on your local station, or in the background of a Ken Burns documentary. CPB paid for that as well. All of that is going away, and exactly how it's going to get taken care of is still up in the air. But you can see for us, directly and indirectly, it's about a little bit more than a 7% hit to our revenues. Overall, for the country, I want to put this in perspective. This is just for public radio. I can't speak to public TV, but other than to say that under the Public Broadcasting Act, TV stations have gotten $3 for every dollar that went to radio. So just multiply all this by 3, and you'll get a sense of the hit to your local PBS station. Overall, public radio is losing about 10% of its resources. We raise on our own from our communities over $1.1 billion collectively. So we're looking at losing $130 million. That is a considerable loss. And again, it is not shared equally. There are stations that lose in biggest cities that lose maybe 3% of their revenue, and other stations, as I say, that go up as high as 70%. There are things we don't know yet, and I think this is a startling list, which I will not read out loud, except to point out that there are investigations underway at the Federal Communications Commission that could declare that the sponsorship messages that provide 25 to 30% or more of local stations' revenues are somehow illegitimate under FCC regulations. This is although the FCC has been enforcing those regulations for decades, rarely finds a problem, but nonetheless, the president's FCC commissioner is conducting an investigation that I worry in the back of my head could be the pretext for taking away station licenses. There are investigations going on about whether we deserve our nonprofit status. So could the IRS, if our country actually goes down a more authoritarian path? Could the IRS be a mechanism for taking away our nonprofit status? Uh, there are very, very big risks afoot here, and I'm not being alarmist. I'm telling you the things that we all are um, needing to think about as operators of independent media, and that I think citizens who care about being informed, every resident of America who cares about being informed needs to have a measure of concern about. Things haven't changed as well for us. We're a very strong organization. We have our state's biggest newsroom through our podcasts, some of which you see illustrated on the screen. Um, we are overall in the top 2% of all podcast producers in America. Tiny little New Hampshire Public Radio, um, based on the downloads of our shows, is in the top 2% nationally. We produce high impact journalism, as many local public radio stations do. We were a nominee for a Peabody Award this year for an investigation of 60 years of child abuse in our state's juvenile justice system. We were a finalist last year for the Pulitzer Prize. Did you know they give Pulitzer Prizes for audio? We were a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for an investigation called The 13th Step, um, that looked at uses of the addiction recovery industry. I have faith that independent media and public media specifically can survive the assault on press freedom and our democratic norms. And that's because people are standing by us, putting their money where their hearts are to fill the gaping permanent hole in our budget, created by the president's war on honest reporting. They're doing it, and they're doing that all across the country for local public radio, because they value what we do. Our journalists in New Hampshire are people's neighbors, and they report in the public interest, holding the powerful to account without fear or favor. Um, it's heady because our donors are coming forward, and I'm going to stop sharing here for a moment. Our sponsors are coming forward, and people recognize, I think, more than ever, the risks and the importance of independent, nonpartisan press in whatever form to keep our country strong. There's also this. At NHPR, we have already seen the worst that can happen. Money is money, but as many of you may know, our journalists and their families have been attacked on account of our reporting. The 13th Step, the podcast I mentioned a moment ago, tells that story, how our investigation of sexual misconduct and abuses of power by a guy named Eric Spofford, who owned New Hampshire's biggest chain of addiction recovery centers, led to vandalism and threats at the homes of our lead reporter, her parents, and our news director. I have always thought that Spofford would not have aimed his lapdogs at us. 4 guys are in prison already on federal felony charges for their attacks on NHPR journalists. He would not have aimed his lapdogs at us if it weren't for, frankly, President Trump's example, the penning of journalists at his rallies, getting his supporters to jeer at reporters, treating journalists with disdain. Well, on Monday, June 2nd, 2025, Eric Spofford was in handcuffs in a courtroom in Boston. The Friday before, he started the day Instagramming from his yacht in Miami, and he ended it that day in federal lockup. He now is facing 4 felony counts of leading a conspiracy to stalk and attack our staff. When the rule of law holds, in spite of the stresses, that's a shred of hope, an accomplishment to celebrate. Now, what about you? What do these attacks on quality media and press freedom mean for you? Well, they make your job as a news consumer both more difficult and more urgent. The less quality news there is and the fewer sources of trustworthy information means you have to work harder to separate the wheat from the chaff, because there is more and more chaff. Uh, the more misinformation, the unverified, inaccurate stuff that gets shared on the internet by people who think it's true, or don't bother to check if it's accurate, because they want to believe it's true. And also disinformation, the lies that people of ill intent post and hype to mislead and confuse us and set us against each other. The challenge we're all up against is urgently to increase our news literacy, our sifting skills, if you will, so that we're consuming wheat and not chaff in our media diets. And we have to make an effort very intentionally to recognize our own biases and our inclination, which is reinforced by those button pushing social media algorithms, to seek out truth that confirms our biases rather than prompting us to ask questions and seek the truth. I'm now going to share my screen again, if I may. So let me talk just a few minutes about what news literacy is. This is not, you don't have to go to college for this. You probably know most of this. I'm glad you're here so that I can help reinforce it and show you that you have the capacity to be a good consumer of news right now. News literacy, as you see, it's the ability to determine the credibility of information and recognize whether it is based on fact or whether it's contrived, whether it's opinion, whether it's something that some guy in a basement in Moscow is cranked out to try to mislead you. News literacy is learning how to think about the information you encounter, but not what to think about any particular source. It's up to you where you go for news, but it's also up to you to become a critical thinker and a critical consumer of news. News literacy is really, as that box on the right says, it's about developing a healthy skepticism about the quality of the information you encounter without becoming a cynic. We don't need more cynics. We're awash in cynics. Skepticism is what makes you a true forger of the path toward a better union, fulfilling our national promise by being a party to the quest for information you can trust. Here are some things that you can do now to become a more literate news consumer and a champion of quality journalism. And I bow to the organization whose name and URL I have on the screen, the News Literacy Project, founded by an old colleague of mine at the Los Angeles Times back in the previous century, is a source of immense volumes of information, tutorials, lessons for students, lessons for community groups, and I commend newslit.org to you if you want to learn more about this. So what can we do individually? We can diversify our sources of information. If you think you're knowing everything you need to know from one source, whether it's the New York Times, NPR, Fox News, your local newspaper, or your Facebook feed, you're probably sucked into a place where your biases are getting confirmed. Sample widely. Check, like reporters, check 2 independent sources for information. Take the time to check more than one source. And then engage in critical thinking about the information you see. Think about the motives and potential biases of the information presented. Who shared that thing on Facebook? Why does she or he want to bring it to your attention? What motive might the person who wrote a story or shared a story have for wanting to mislead you or to genuinely inform you? You can see on the screen that there's another pitch, which is to support quality journalism. I cannot help but emphasize that. I'm not here to raise funds for NHPR or anybody else. But if you want there to be quality journalism in your community, it doesn't come free. It's really expensive. And so supporting those that do a good job will get you more good journalism. Here's some more specifics about what you can do. Uh, when you're trying to evaluate whether a news source merits your trust, check for these things. Does an article, or does your broader reading of a bunch of articles, or your viewing of a bunch of video, or listening on the radio to a news source, are you hearing multiple credible sources cited? Are you hearing the news presented in uh, amid passionate screams, or through in thoughtful conversation? Um, when a fact is asserted, is a source attached to it? Can you see that the source of news is aiming to be fair, as opposed to aiming to get you riled up or to only tell one side of the story? Um, do you get context from this source? Do you get headlines to be alarmed about, or video to scare you? Or do you get the whole story, or some semblance of an attempt to get the whole story? These are all things that, as a critical thinker, these are conditions you can set around the information that you turn to. You know, is there a byline on the story? Yeah, I've got examples here from all around: the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, NHPR, CNN. Is there a person who told this story? And can you tell if the person has five fingers or six fingers when they raise their hand in the middle of a report? It's probably an AI and not a person, and I wouldn't trust it. When you're reading a story, are sources referenced? Are there actual links that you can click on to data, to original documents, to a real person who, if you went and Googled them, you'd see, yes, that person really is a government official who has a background that makes her or him an informed source. Can you tell what the organization's ethical standards are? If you go to nhpr.org, you'll find our code of ethics. If you go to npr.org, you'll find their ethics handbook. If you can't figure that out about the source, maybe question whether it's one to be trusted. Um, Here's a couple other questions. Does the news source tell you how to get in touch with it? If you go to if you want to get in touch, say with NHPR, you'll find this link on our website, and it will take you to a page that has a cute dog on it, and additionally will show you how to get in touch with us, how to get in touch with our news department, or our podcasters, or our program director. Um, Likewise, now I need to be able to just let me move this bar on my screen so that I can show you another thing. Um, does the news source publish corrections? I just want to show you probably the most dramatic correction I've ever seen certainly from a public radio station. We did a podcast a few years ago about the parole system. And after it was all published and all released in podcast form, the reporter started hearing from people and discovered she had missed a whole gigantic dimension of the story. She had everything in her story was right, and she had gotten the big story wrong. And so, you know what she did? She came to her editors at NHPR and said, "We need to redo this. We need to go back and fix this story so that it actually reflects what's going on." She had already left NHPR and gone to work at Vermont Public Radio next door. Her editors at VPR agreed to lend her back to us so that she could have the time to re-report this project so that we could republish it and fess up to our mistake. Trust the organizations that fess up to their mistakes. Hold them accountable for that. I think this is where I will stop sharing again. I want to circle back now before we get to your questions to where we began. News is being made every day up the street from where I'm sitting at New Hampshire's grand old state house and across New Hampshire state and local government. This is true in your state too, or in your town or your big city. Deals are being cut, regulations are getting drafted, hearings are being held, legislation is being designed, campaigns for office are getting launched. Thanks to independent, nonpartisan media, the topic of these remarks, in case you've lost track, um, reporters like our Josh Rogers of NHPR, our political reporter of 25 years standing, uh, a reporter like Josh is at your state capitol making sense of what's going on. Beat reporters like ours who cover healthcare and education, energy and the environment, immigration, the economy, are providing context so that the residents of our state or the residents of yours can be informed and empowered community members. With our community support, NHPR has grown into New Hampshire's biggest news organization. With the community's support here, your support for independent media in your community, with your news literacy and your vigilant defense of press freedom, I'm confident that we can all stay on that course. I do want to show you one more thing. Let me just get it here to the front of my computer so that you'll be able to see it when I share my screen one more time. Um, uh, I wrote a note to our board of directors, our independent board of directors, the night that in the early morning when Congress finally voted to eliminate federal funding. And one of our board members, a lovely, I suspect she's an AARP member, who lives in just outside Peterborough, New Hampshire. Um, um, uh, she wrote back and she used the following phrase to conclude her remarks. She said, "Onward, damn it." And we've kind of taken that up as our motto at NHPR, and I'm actually seeing it start to spread across uh, public media. Um, we now, because we're public media, we have to make mugs and tote bags as a way to let members of our tribe uh, uh, show that they're parts of the public media community. We've got a tote bag that we'll be offering during our pledge drive this fall, and we've captured um, our board member Sue Chalet's call to arms. We slapped some headphones on a beaver, and our listeners and readers here in New Hampshire will be able to get this fall. But I would tell you, wherever you are, I think this is a pretty good attitude to adopt. This is our country. Nobody gets to take it or our freedoms away from us. We have to move on. We have to be strong. So I say to you, onward, damn it. And I'm now happy to take some questions.
All right, Jim, we have a number of questions.
Great.
One is, what can we do as individuals to stop the assault on the free press?
So you've done something important by being here this evening. You've gotten yourself better informed, and you've come to understand the risks better. I've tried to outline some of the things that you can do. I do think that supporting your local news organizations is a fundamental thing to do. If you have money, support them that way. If you don't have any money to spare, you know what you can do is just about everybody is on some kind of social media. Um, you can share their stories so that your friends and your networks' Facebook feeds are filled with good quality information. Um, uh, if you're not on social media but you're reading um, online, you can share the links to stories to your friends. Just send them an email when you read something or watch something on TV that you've used your critical judgment skills, your critical thinking skills, and judged it to be um, uh, quality, accurate, fair, contextualized content. Call up a friend and say, you gotta go, you gotta turn on the TV now, turn on the radio now. Read the story in the paper so that you are part of propagating quality information in your community. Um, I hope and pray, and I truly believe we're not going to have to go out on the street to to save our freedoms. We're more resilient than that. Our institutions are stronger than that. So I'm not literally calling you to arms. Um, I wouldn't be much good with a rifle, honestly, but be part of the solution by supporting and spreading quality news.
So we have another question. Why are so many TV news channels on default in many public places? I'm not quite sure.
You mean like in your doctor's office or something like that? If that's what you mean, frankly, the more and more I see HGTV on in those public places. I know we stopped watching the 11 o'clock news here at our house, and we only watch House Hunters International or House Hunters or whatever they're showing because we couldn't fall asleep if we watched the news or even, one of the late night talk shows. Um, some places, if you go to the airport, CNN has a business deal with your airport and they may have CNN on, or Fox News might have a deal with the airport and they've got Fox News on. Um, if I'm not even sure I'm answering the right question. So if you want to clarify, go into the chat and perhaps clarify your question and I can respond to it more effectively.
Okay. We have another question. What are some other ways or sources for learning about media literacy?
Um, so I'm going to type into the chat that uh, the source that I cited, newslit.org. It is a very powerful um, resource on this subject. Um, I think that, you know, um, there are in many communities at your community school, at the community college, there are classes that you can take on media literacy. Um, I believe actually, and I'll stand corrected. I think AARP has resources on this. In fact, if you have any trouble finding resources, I'm also going to type into the chat my uh, email address, and I'll look some things up and share some things with you. There's 60 odd of us here, and if all of you write to me, I'll respond to each and every one of you. I see. So I'm seeing here in the South, there's one news channel on that's in a lot of places. Um, if it's here's what I would say about it. If you don't like the choice that your hospital or doctor's office or someplace where you're kind of having it thrust upon you, if you don't like the choice, say something to somebody. Say, maybe. Uh, maybe there's a lot of people here who want to watch Fox News in the waiting room, but not all of us want to watch Fox News. Why don't you switch it up a bit? Um, uh, I don't think there's anything to be embarrassed about to say, even say the rest of the thought. I'm concerned that you've got a you know, that there's more propaganda than news on what you've got playing in the waiting room. It would be better if you just turned off the TV than to have that thing played. Just speak up for your preferences.
Okay. There was a comment from one of our members in the audience who was in Connecticut who was saddened because some of the programming that was offered by her public TV station, the cooking shows, that type of
Hmm.
thing, yoga, that they are now no longer available.
Well, every organization needs to make choices. I'm friends with the chief executive at Connecticut Public, and he does an outstanding job. The whole organization does. I noticed this afternoon when the National Edward R. Murrow Awards were announced that of smaller stations in America, only two, whether it was commercial or nonprofit, only two stations won two National Murrow Awards today. One was Connecticut Public, the other was New Hampshire Public Radio. Um, we all are making choices all the time about our limited resources. There will be more choices that have to be made as stations and as our public radio and TV systems as a whole grapple with, overall, it's a loss of $550 million a year between TV and radio. And I certainly can't sit here and guarantee you that something you love will not go away. I think that choices will be made in to try to meet the needs the most of the most audience members we can. We also are all trying to invest to reach new audiences, and some of that involves, reassigning resources from let's call them traditional media like TV and radio into our digital production capabilities. And that has to be done with care. Um, but I have found that our most loyal supporters at NHPR want to see us investing in our future. And so they do tend to understand if we do occasionally stop doing something, it's because we're trying to do new things to build an even bigger community of informed and engaged neighbors.
Thank you, Jim. One more question before we wrap up. Is someone wanted to know if there was a link, between, let me see if I can get this so it's correct. Um, what is the relationship between public radio and public television? Is it if something hurts one, does it hurt the other?
Uh, there's a lot of things that are intertwined, and some things that are separate. Many places around the country, I think at least 70 communities, including a number of whole states, um, there is one local station that is both NPR and PBS. It's both public TV and radio. We have that in most of New England, although we don't have it in New Hampshire. So in that case, it's all intertwined. And the acts of losing federal funding, when you add together, taking out um, the radio and TV support for those stations, it's a real clobbering. I don't think any station is losing more money than GBH in Boston, which makes so many public TV shows that we all love and rely on, Nova, Frontline. But because they are the biggest producer of of public TV programming in the country, some of which was uh, uh, they got Corporation for Public Broadcasting funds for. They're losing that. They're losing the support for their TV station, for their radio station, and then some of the stations that acquire their content are not going to be able to pay for it. So those are big hits. There are other places where we're quite separate. Um, uh, I know I hardly know anywhere where the public media leaders are not in coordination and collaboration in their own communities. New Hampshire PBS is an independent um, nonprofit like we are. Uh, we get checks that are meant for them, and they get checks that are meant for us, and we send them back and forth in the mail. We also do things like sponsor candidate forums together and produce public affairs programming together. So it's kind of different in every community.
Well, thank you, Jim. And there were a lot of kudos and thank yous in the chat that a lot of people really did enjoy this presentation this evening. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today because it has been a pleasure to learn more about how we can support the free press with you. I also want to thank our audience for joining us for today's discussion. I hope you enjoyed hearing from our panel and that the information and the opportunities shared will be of value to you. I would encourage all of you to visit AARP's website. You do not have to be a member of AARP to access it, and there should be a link in the chat, www.aarp.org, and check out the wonderful activities that are on the AARP New Hampshire website, aarp.org/NH, for more virtual programs that are coming soon. We also have live cooking demonstrations, we have paint and sip events, gentle yoga, and a lot more educational programs. If you are interested in joining us as a New Hampshire volunteer, AARP New Hampshire volunteer, please email us at nhaarp@aarp.org. Be safe, everybody, and take care. And thank you again, Jim, for such a wonderful presentation.
Thank you all so much. See you soon.
Okay. I am, oops.